So, folks, you may have heard about a magical land called Canada. It's full of maple syrup and wonderful, hardworking people who just want to make your life better and their own lives better and everyone's life generally better. And Donald Trump seems to be under the impression that Canada, a sovereign nation, is part of the United States to a degree that is concerning. It started off as something that I think a lot of people read as a joke. And every time he doubles down on it, it reads like less and less of a joke, especially to people in Canada.
Canada's been very bad to us on trade, but now Canada's going to have to start paying up. And Canada's been tough on the military because they have a very low military cost. They think we're going to, protect them with our military, which is unfair. So Canada's going to be a very interesting situation because, we just don't need their product. And yet they survive off the fact that we do 95% of what they do. And Canada is just absolutely, I say it, and sometimes people smile and sometimes they say great idea, but Canada, their taxes would come down greatly, their security would go up greatly. Amazing things happen to Canada, and really Canada in this particular, why would we pay $200 billion a year in subsidies to Canada when they're not a state? You do that for a state, but you don't do that for somebody else's country. Canada.
Unironically, the day that these tariffs go into effect, Canada should shut off electricity to the states in America that rely on it. Unironically, do you have any idea how much political pressure that would instantly put on Washington? Guys, one of the reasons he's doing this, by the way, is because, and I want you all to be prepared for this, he is absolutely going to put tariffs on Canada. The same way he is absolutely going to put tariffs on Mexico. And he's absolutely going to put tariffs on the European Union and every other country. Okay? And the reason he is doing that is not because of any 5D diplomatic chess. He's not doing it to get anything from those countries. He's doing it to tax Americans. That's why he's doing it. He is doing it as a way of doing a flat tax. One of the things that conservatives in America have long wanted to do. Because what does a flat tax do, folks? It takes a bunch of money from everybody across the spectrum. And he wants to do that because it effectively is a way of lowering taxes for billionaires. It is part of the plan to raise revenue. And keep in mind, it will only be revenue raised temporarily.
A common abuse tactic Trump often employs is to continue pushing and violating boundaries to an outrageous degree to continually confuse and fluster.
It's true. It's true. Does the entirety of Minnesota get their electricity from Canada? No. But he is doing it as part of this insane robbery of the American people. It is being done as an extension. That's why there are no conditions attached to these tariffs. It's part of the plan to raise money that they need to take from all of us, as well as Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, in order to give the largest tax cut in history to the richest people to ever exist. That's why they're doing this. Antagonizing Canada in this way is part of his way of obfuscating why the tariffs are going into place. No, the tariffs, Travenoid, the tariffs are going to happen for all of the reasons I just said, because they're the way they want to raise revenue. It's like the president of the United States, guys, can't unilaterally raise taxes. The president of the United States cannot impose a flat tax. The president of the United States can unilaterally impose a tariff. What happened to It's the Economy, stupid? It's because the economy motivated people to elect Trump. But how Trump acts in office is like only moderated by that if Donald Trump gives a shit about working class people once he's in office, and he doesn't. This is what how they view this, guys, is like the last time they'll get a huge robbery attempt. You know? That's what they're doing. They know it will damage the economy. They just don't care. Because if the economy collapses, great. They'll have a bunch of money with which they can buy up, hoover up all of the land and resources of America into their vast billionaire troves. Like fucking dragons. And if the economy doesn't collapse, then, hey, they got a bunch of money. That's great. That's literally the calculation going on here. I don't think many of them, and I'm not going to say I don't think all of them, I don't think many of them have considered what happens if they lose that core base of support and everyone starts realizing they've been had. Because I think they've banked on the fact that Republicans are just, like, your average Republican voter is just too stupid to realize when they're getting fucked. And I think they're going to catch on relatively quick, given how fast his support is dropping. So we'll see. The silver lining of an economic collapse is that there's basically no way for Donald Trump to implode the economy that doesn't result in these people realizing they've been had. As somebody had observed the other day, it's a speed run to class consciousness. So we'll see. Now, folks, we also have to talk about this particular clip.
Going with Canada, there was obviously a delay in implementing those tariffs.
I spoke to Governor Trudeau on numerous occasions, and we'll see what happens. But it just sets up so good for them. Look, the people would pay much less tax than they're paying right now. They'd have perfect military protection. They don't have any military protection because and you take a look at what's going on out there. You have Russian ships, you have China ships, you have Chinese ships, you have a lot of ships out there, and you know, people are in danger. This is a different world today. It's a different world. They need our protection, yes.
They need our protection. Like a fucking mobster. Wait, they were right in that assumption? No. They're not. Like, Alan Smith, you have to understand. Entire states in the American South are propped up by federal government employees. Government employees that are currently being fired en masse. MAGA might have been duped by Donald Trump into electing him. When suddenly all of them lose their jobs, they know who's responsible. When someone appoints themselves and declares themselves a king, and they order you to lose your job, You know who is responsible. It's not rocket science. There's a direct line. Like, fuck, man. I don't care if you'll laugh when that happens. I don't care if your response is fuck those people. What I'm trying to say is that this is good. Because if they realize they're being fucked, they might do something about it. Do you understand that the point of this show is not just, I'm so glad bad people suffer? Do you understand that? The point of this show is that I want to make things better for everybody. I want to avoid a fascist dictatorship. The point of the advocacy and the point of pointing this out is not, haha, fuck those people. Okay, then understand that if your response to me saying, yeah, they'll understand that they're getting fucked is good, fuck them, that is not helpful to us. It isn't helpful to look at a bunch of people who are our potential allies against a fascist administration and say, ha ha, fuck you. That's not helpful. We need people to be doing helpful things. I understand that there will be a point of catharsis here. I get it. There is a Schadenfreude to it. But also, we need to keep in mind that as people on the left, we need to be making a better world. And that world, like it or not, is going to include people like that. Every worker in this country is our ally in the struggle for a better world. Solidarity forever is not contingent on whether or not it's solidarity with other people in your class against the people who would oppress all of you. Does that make sense? We do not have the luxury in this time for our petty grievances. We don't have the luxury. That was a luxury of last year. If it makes you feel any better, I'm going to make you a mod on my channel. What? Why? Thank you for the $5 Canadian, though. Also, I understand that maybe my reactions are too big. I understand that, and I do apologize for yelling. But, like, understand that fundamentally our movement and our actions need to be coming from a place of love and respect and not hatred. I don't know how allying with violent hillbilly MAGA types will help us. Please explain. Okay. Then I'll explain this. Do you understand that in the history of the labor movement, the folks who lived in company towns were not progressive scions, right? The workers who worked the coal mines were not, learned, progressive thinking people, generally speaking. You understand that a lot of people who work auto factory jobs may not be the most, welcoming folks, right? Okay. So if you understand that, then you understand that the struggle of the working class, of the working folk of America, is not one that can be divided into, well, they may be workers, but fuck them, you know? It's a systemic struggle. It is a struggle that evaluates things on the basis of our working conditions and our relationship with capital. Because fundamentally, that relationship with capital is what can radicalize people to better political positions. When we're talking about people losing their jobs en masse due to the government firing people, that is a catalyst. That is something that can take people who previously supported Donald Trump and make them realize that their real enemy are the capitalists, the billionaires, the people who are trying to exploit them as well as all of us. Okay? That catalyst is important for us to nurture because it can help us create allies. Okay? It can help us create people who yesterday were our enemies and would have seen us dead, and turn them into people who will stand side by side with us when when the union needs to rise. When the union's inspiration through the workers' blood shall run. That's why it's important. You know? That's why it's important. Are we still playing games after this? Boy, I'd love to. Boy, gosh golly, would I love to play some video games. We're totally fucked. Yeah, with that attitude. So, anyway. Yeah, I think Lee Kestner, I think that's a really good example. Luigi Mangione and the way people responded to Luigi Mangione transcended politics. It transcended how both MAGA folk and liberals and far leftists all understood Luigi Mangione and his statement against the predatory healthcare system, you know? Well, Alan Smith, you're wrong. No one is too stupid to gain class consciousness, and no one's hate is engraved in their hearts like stone. The petty hatred that you recognize that currently exists within a lot of MAGA folk, that melts in comparison to the realization that the people on the top are fucking them and their children and every single person they love. Those petty hatreds in the face of solidarity die. Is it weird if your yelling is both a little scary and a slight turn on? No, that's good. I like that. That makes me feel better. Okay. Arise, ye prisoners of starvation, arise, ye wretched of the earth, for justice thunders condemnation, a better world's in birth. Indeed. All right. Moving on. I think my point is made. What was it you said last week? No permanent enemy is no permanent allies. Besides, who doesn't love a good redemption arc? People can change. I did. I changed. You know? I used to be conservative. I used to be bigoted against LGBTQ people because I grew up in a house where my dad told me, son, you have to tolerate gay people, but you can never accept them. And so I think it is really important to understand that people who may be intolerant today are not destined to be intolerant forever. And in solidarity, we find a decent treatment for hatred. In love, all things melt away. Yeah, I can tell you, I was really confused and fucked up for a while after I figured out I was trans. Pluvius, I was trying to think of the
Being
word.
Scariest is a perfectly valid response to Jack laying the smack down.
Scare-roused. Yes. That word. I was trying to think of it and I couldn't quite grok it. Thank you for the $5 super chat. God. I think that may be a necessary piece of reading for us folks. Am I sick? No, I've just been yelling a lot. I've been literally yelling for like the last 3 days during my streams because I've been so worked up. Now, folks, some necessary reading here. This was published in the Globe and Mail. The democratic world will have to get along without America. It may even have to defend itself from it. By Andrew Coyne. I wonder if we have underestimated the gravity of the situation the democratic world faces. Even now, as the United States hurtles toward autocracy, the petty grotesqueries perhaps tell the story better than anything else. A reporter barred from the White House for not using the name Gulf of America. President Donald Trump naming himself chair of the Kennedy Center by a unanimous vote of its board. The tendency is still to describe events in relatively conventional terms. For example, the mistakes that Mr. Trump is said to have made in his dealings with Vladimir Putin, of the United States as an unreliable ally under Mr. Trump and so forth. But that is not the situation we are now in. The policies on Ukraine announced, or rather confirmed this week by Mr. Trump and his defense secretary Pete Hegseth, peace talks without Ukraine. Ukraine locked out of NATO membership indefinitely. Russia keeps all territories gained since its illegal and unprovoked invasion because, as Mr. Trump said, they lost a lot of soldiers taking them. Are not, as described, irresponsible concessions to Russia. They are not concessions at all. They are demands, aimed not at Russia, but at Ukraine, and presented to it jointly by the United States of Russia and America. They are of a piece with the Trump administration's very clear signaling that it will not be bound by Article 5 of the NATO treaty, that the United States will not, as promised, come to Europe's defense should Russia broaden its attacks on it, but will, as Mr. Trump so memorably put it, let them do whatever the hell they want. So I think that this is perhaps the most accurate reading of what is happening here internationally. Okay? This is where we're at. This is the sobering reality. And maybe an even worse part of the reality is that things internationally have gotten worse since this was written 5 days ago. Okay? This is accurate. In these in this, we see some slight prognostications of things that have become already a reality. Okay? And I think here in the United States, we need to hear how other countries are viewing our actions. Because here in the States, a lot of the media around this is like, ho ho, hee hee, he's making little jokey jokes, tee hee. But it's horrifying. It's horrifying. That is not merely an abrogation of its treaty commitments or an abdication of America's historic responsibilities, or even a declaration that the way is now open for other hostile powers to launch attacks on democratic states. The United States, under Mr. Trump, cannot be considered an idle bystander in the great twilight struggle between the democracies and the dictatorships, as it was in the 1930s. It is now on the side of the dictatorships. And to really hammer this home, over this week, I've seen a number of different publications here in the United States finally start to cotton onto this a little bit. I believe it was a piece either in The Nation or the American Prospect, I can't remember which, that correctly points out that what it seems that the United States is doing is forming its own axis of allies with authoritarian regimes around the world. And in the process is trying to spin that shit into gold by saying they're the real democracies. As if we are so stupid and so blind that we would not realize that Viktor Orban is not a democratically elected leader. As if we wouldn't realize that Vladimir Putin has sham elections. Where in history was America not on the side of dictatorship? World War II. Boom. Nailed it. Moving on. The United States that openly threatens to invade Panama or Denmark or to annex Canada has not just stepped outside international law, including the base Westphalian prescription of attempts to alter borders by force. Neither does a country that launches trade wars on a different country every day, including countries with which it has long-standing free trade treaties, reveal a simple lack of commitment to a rules-based approach to international trade. It is engaged in an all-out assault on both. It has become an outlaw state. And it's not wrong. None of this is wrong. The only thing here that is missing from this analysis is that ultimately, why this is being done is not for the empowerment of the United States. It's not being done to do anything other than enrich the richest people in the world. What we're seeing here in this, and what is being described to us here, much like how neoliberalism stripped many of our public infrastructure and our public works projects here in America and sold them off to private corporations. They are stripping our democratic ties for parts to sell to the highest bidders, to enrich the oligarchs of America. That's what is happening here. Okay? They are doing this to commit the robbery. And in doing so, they look around the world to find the other robbers for the heist. And in this regard, too, it's aligning itself with the dictatorships. That is what dictatorships do. It is intrinsic to their nature. Just as they refuse to be bound by law internally, we are counting down the days to when the Trump administration defies its first court order. So they recognize no law in their dealings with other states, or rules of any kind. You'll have noticed they also cheat at sports, as does Mr. Trump. And you know what? Excellent elbow jab there, Mr. Coin. Excellent. Excellent. I appreciate the elbows. Okay? Genuinely. And yeah. Honestly, this is a good idea I had not considered before, but it's very patently obvious. A state that does not honor its international obligations will also not honor its internal ones. A leadership that does not honor its ties to other leaderships will not likewise tolerate or, uphold its responsibilities to those that put it in power. Yeah, Donald Trump was not content to cheat at golf. He also had to cheat at golf. Wordplay. Humor. Checking that off. It's not just that the democratic world can no longer count on America. It is that America under Trump is no longer necessarily part of the democratic world. Neither fully democratic in its own affairs, nor committed to the welfare of other democracies, but hostile to both. If the international order is to be preserved, then it will have to be preserved in part from the United States. Certainly, it will have to be rebuilt without it. And that's kind of that, that's a really chilling thing to think about. In pursuing this isolationist policy, the world must continue on. And it will continue on without us here in America. Sobering stuff. Which means abandoning all attempts to propitiate? I know the word, I've just never said it out loud. Propitiate? Yeah. Mr. Trump on military matters, in hopes of keeping NATO together. That is with the United States in it. Not only will that do nothing to strengthen NATO, an organization to which Mr. Trump is viscerally opposed, But our desire to strike a deal only invites him to use it against us as an instrument of blackmail. We need to face some unpleasant facts. NATO, as a transatlantic democratic alliance, is dead. Henceforth, the defense of Europe will be the responsibility of Europe. And the defense of Canada, wedged as we are between the United States and Russia, with the North an increasingly tempting prize, we better get some allies fast. The same applies to the World Trade Organization, or any of the other instruments of international cooperation developed after the Second World War, in which the United States played such a constructive part. They will have to be reconstituted, de jure or de facto, without it. We will need new defense alignments, different trade agreements, the works. That is not our choice. That is America's, or at least the Trump administration's. The democratic world must therefore regard and treat it as it does the other non-democracies, not as an ally to be consulted, but as an adversary to be contained. That's where we're at. And everything said in this is 100% on point. I don't know anything really about the Globe and Mail's political alignment. I don't know anything about this writer's political alignment, but I do know that this is a 100% accurate read on the situation. And it is also likely, over the next 4 years, what is going to happen. Because what J.D. Vance and Donald Trump have just done is they walked into the halls of power in Europe and they took a massive shit all over it and then said, "You're on your own, suckers," and then walked out. It was the dissolution of NATO. Because, folks, if Europe cannot rely on the United States, what good is NATO? If Canada cannot rely on the United States, which allies is it most bound to? So, what we're looking at here is a true break. And out of necessity, Canada, Europe, Mexico, the globe at large is going to, as Mr. Coyne points out accurately here, either reconstitute new bodies and new organizations of which the United States is not a part. Because I think with the election of Donald Trump for a second time, we've shown we cannot be reliable allies in the times ahead. So we are going to see either completely new organizations form, or we are going to see the existing orders readjust to function without us. If you are conservative, if you are liberal, if you are a leftist, we all need to come to terms with this new reality. That America has abdicated its responsibilities, abandoned its allies, and that the damage has been done. The torpedo has been launched, the bridge has collapsed, and now America is utterly and completely alone. Outside of whatever countries it can cow with brute military force into doing its bidding. It is possible to rebuild those diplomatic ties, but understand, just like building an actual infrastructure project, such a rebuilding takes time. And the dependability, the stability of any kind of diplomatic agreement that is made from here on out depends upon the United States regaining and reconstituting itself into a more stable and reliable ally. Do you think the US will be kicked out of NATO? I think it unlikely that the European countries are just going to rip up NATO. I think what is more likely is that they will form an additional military alliance, or the leaders within NATO will make their own contingency plans in the case of NATO being triggered to mobilize. And those plans will not include the United States. So, yes. Yeah, they'll form NATO. Exactly. Exactly, too, Dad Smooch. And I heard the Peggle 2 joke, even if nobody else did. I heard it. Are we the baddies? Oh, most definitely. Most definitely. And for my part, I am deeply, deeply sorry to all of our international friends out there that our country is maneuvering in this way. And I'm doing everything I can. I think you can hear it in my voice to try and make it better, to try and stop this madness. And I hope every American here will stand with me to try to improve things. Because this madness cannot hold.